replacing my boss. My name is Orla Kilcullen. I'm with the Climate Unit in the Department of Foreign Affairs. Sinead Walsh, the head of the unit, was due to be speaking today. Unfortunately, she can't make it, and a number of our speakers are caught up in negotiations, being where we are in COP. So a very warm welcome to you all today to the session on minimising and addressing loss and damage with locally led adaptation and risk transfer financing solutions. Thank you to led by our hosts, UNDRR, the Joint SDG Fund, UNU EHS, and the UNCDF Impact Capital for Development. I'm just going to take you through the kind of quick run of events. So our speakers today are, we have a keynote address from Her Excellency Ms. Puakina Boreham, former Minister of Natural Resources for Tuvalu. We then will be joined by Mamadou Diallo, who is speaking on behalf of the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources for the Gambia. Then we will be joined by His Excellency, the Minister of Finance for the Kingdom of Tonga. He may be late, so we'll make some adjustments to our sessions. And he will be followed by Mr. Ibrahim Chegdiong, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Director General of the African Risk Capacity Group. And then last but absolutely not least, Dr. Mahmoud Moyadeen is UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP27 and UN Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. He will lead a panel discussion. We'll take some Q&A from the audience. The event is also being live streamed, so there will be an opportunity for people online to ask questions also. And then he will also give the closing remarks. I've been informed that we are going to be strict on time. So we have an hour and a half for today, or right now an hour and 25 minutes. So I'll ask the speakers to please bear with me if I do ask you to wrap things up a little bit. So welcome everybody to this very important event. I think we were all delighted, surprised on the first day the Loss and Damage Fund was passed, and it was a great start to the week. I know energy levels are probably waning a little bit at this stage. People are tired, involved in a lot of the negotiations, but we'll try and keep today's session lively and informative. So it was great. It was an excellent start to COP, but we know that there is a lot more that needs to be done. And while the issues of financing will remain on the table, there's an awful lot of really excellent work that's already taking place and a lot of initiatives that we can learn from and build on and maintain and keep going. Particularly looking at early warning systems, emergency preparedness, comprehensive risk management, and building the resilience of communities, their livelihoods, and very importantly, their ecosystems, so that we can continue to address the impacts of climate change. Just to say very briefly, the Irish government, I hope many of you are aware, have been kind of championing the Loss and Damage Fund and very heavily engaged in all of the negotiations. And the concepts that we're talking about today around locally led adaptation and risk transfer are things that have been really kind of driving a lot of our engagement, looking at vulnerability, but very much, I say, the locally led piece, that the communities that are being affected by the climate impacts have to be at the front and centre of designing the initiatives that will help them to overcome this. They're often the ones that come up with the most innovative solutions to the challenges that they're facing all day, every day. And we are proud to be supporting a number of initiatives in addition to the Loss and Damage Fund, but specifically looking at global shield and early warning systems through the SOF initiative. So I'm kind of delighted to be asked to moderate the session today. It's such an excellent fit with our priorities. So anyway, this is not about me, it's not about Ireland, so I will pass to our first speaker on our keynote address. So I'd like to ask Her Excellency to please come up and join us at the podium.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the warm welcome. And it's my honor to be here today and to be able to address you all on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Minister of Climate Change of Tuvalu, Honorable Seve Bainiu. Excellencies and members of the panel, our audience here in Dubai and those of you who are joining online from around the world, We all know that the impacts of climate change are caused by fossil fuels. For Tuvalu, a low-lying atoll nation, we are living the impacts of climate change and resulting sea level rise. Our land is constantly being eaten away. Islands are disappearing or being submerged. Not in the future, but now. Our food and water security is under threat, and the livelihoods and very lives of our people hang in the balance. We are working on all fronts to protect our nation and our people, including looking to make the Pacific region a fossil fuel-free region. And we call on the international community to support us to launch a call for fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. The small island developing states, who in total contribute less than 0.03% to total emissions, are at the forefront, at the brunt of the impact of climate change and sea level rise. And therefore, it is a matter of our security and our survival. And that's why we are very eager and committed to ensuring we address the causes of climate change, which we know very well is caused by fossil fuel production and consumption. Excuse me. While there is hope, we continue our efforts to adapt. And that's why we also want to see more finance for adaptation. Funds made available to the Loss and Damage Fund, as well as early warning systems, emergency preparedness, and comprehensive risk management. To date, we have the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, or we call it known as the LOCAL, which has mobilized over $180 million for adaptation. Those funds have provided climate-resilient sources of drinking water for many communities, or improved their preparedness for climate disasters, such as cyclones, floods, or drought. These funds have proven invaluable to the communities that have received them, but they remain a drop in the ocean. Countries with limited resources, small island developing states, such as ours, and our friends in many African and Asian nations, need funds on a far, far greater scale. Funds need to be made available today, not some far off tomorrow. For the sake of our grandchildren, we cannot wait. We cannot hold back. In Tuvalu with LOCAL, we are strengthening the institutions and financial transfer systems we need to disperse finance effectively for maximum results at the community level. And with LOCAL, we have made an application to the Green Climate Fund, which we hope will bring additional sources for adaptation. But unfortunately, we are already seeing local governments and communities using scarce resources received through a mechanism like LOCAL to reconstruct or repair climate change damages. We need to turn this situation around. More climate finance, more investment in disaster readiness, more willingness to commit resources to the new Loss and Damage Fund. And we don't have to delay it any further. I thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think it's the point that you're making, we shouldn't have to decide between addressing the here and now and the immediate needs and the life-saving needs versus the longer-term solutions, that we need to make sure that there are resources to deal with all of the issues. So now I think we're going to play a short video, which has been put together by the organisers of today's event.
Communities everywhere need resources to adapt and address the impacts of climate change. And the need is great. Greatest in the most vulnerable regions. Countries and communities that contributed the least to global warming and have the most limited resources to respond and adapt. Across the globe, scalable solutions for climate finance delivery are in place. These can address pressing needs at the community level and offset the losses and damages resulting from irreversible climate change. United Nations agencies are coming together for action. The Joint SDG Fund supports countries in accelerating progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, including on climate. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, convenes partners and coordinates activities to create safer, more resilient communities. UNDRR is the co-lead of the Early Warning for All initiative and builds loss and damage data systems. The local climate adaptive living facility, designed and managed by the UN Capital Development Fund, channels grants to local government authorities for spending on adaptation initiatives that are locally identified and implemented. Grants come with capacity building and technical support. The United Nations University, UNU, is the academic arm of the United Nations and acts as a global think tank. The Pacific Insurance and Climate Adaptation Programme is jointly implemented by UNCDF, UNU Institute for Environment and Human Security, and the UN Development Programme. These are tangible examples of UN-led actions helping the most climate-vulnerable countries as they minimise and address loss and damage with locally led adaptation and risk transfer financing solutions. It's time for coordinated action that leverages experience and delivers at scale.
So now we're going to move to the first of the sessions today. So I'm going to ask Mr. Mamadou Diallo. I believe, like me, he was promoted this week. We had dinner together last week. We obviously did something right because we both got nominated for today's event. So if you'd like to join at the podium and then take a seat with us here afterwards.
I would say Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, colleagues. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh John, UN Assistant Secretary General and Director of Africa Risk Capacity, Honorable Minister of Finance Tuvalu, His Excellency Mr. Seif Panelu, the Speaker, His Excellency Mr. Tofian Tueti, you may excuse me for the pronunciation of the words, Honorable Minister of Finance of the Kingdom of Tonga, Dr. Mahmoud Malen, UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP27, and of course the moderator, Madam Sinead. It is gratifying to step in behalf of my Honorable Minister of the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources of the Gambia, Honorable Minister Rohi John Manja, who is in another high-level meeting and cannot make it to this one. I am the advisor to the Honorable Minister of Environment in the Gambia. Okay. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here today and to have this opportunity to highlight the urgency for climate finance for adaptation and to showcase what the Gambia is doing on a practical level with the local mechanism. As Minister of Environment Climate Change, or I will take the step of the ministry, we are working hard to advocate for the Gambian people here at COP28, just as Gambian people are working hard to deal with the impacts of climate change every single day. Climate change has been hitting, it is hitting every time. In the Gambia, as in Tuvalu, we have been dealing with climate change for many years, and we know we have to adapt, not out of choice, but actually out of necessity. We cannot sit waiting. Farmers are looking for new ways to cope with unpredictable rains, increasingly aware that they need climate-smart irrigation solutions or improved drainage and soil protection measures to produce enough to feed their families. They have already amassed a wealth of experience in dealing with climate change, and therefore it is important that they are included and given a strong voice in finding and implementing solutions. No more top-down approach, but the bottom-up approach in fighting the climate change saga. Communities, I believe, are central to getting adaptation right. They need it. We need to bring together this local knowledge with an instrument that can deliver flexible yet reliable climate finance for locally led adaptation. And that is why, as well as being an advocate for the Gambian people, we are also proud to say that we are a local ministerial ambassador, because the local climate adaptive living facility fits the bill perfectly. Local is a perfect approach. It was launched in the Gambia in 2018, and since then, over 45,000 Gambians have benefited from local projects to date in 32 wards. These projects have been undertaken after consultation with communities, as who knows better what it most urgently need to adapt than the people themselves. In many cases, community members are doing the work on these projects through cash for work initiatives, earning a wage while building the resilience of their community. It appears to be a winning formula. One of the aspects of local that is most encouraging for us as a ministry is to see how its implementation has built the capacity of our local government authorities. Local works with a variety of local actors in support of existing country systems to channel finance to the closest possible level to the ground. And this finance comes with guidance, capacity building, and oversight. Ladies and gentlemen, already the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, and Natural Resources in Gambia has identified the Department of Community Development as a delivery mechanism for the LDC-led Life AR, Least Developed Countries Initiative for Effective Adaptation and Resilience. This is one of 6 countries, front-runner countries. I mean, the Gambia is one of 6 front-runner countries working on Life AR. And we have identified the Department of Community Development to be the delivery mechanism, to be the interface between the authorities and the communities, to help communities in planning, project planning, analysis, and of course, implementation. They have worked with the first local project that was supported by the UNCDF. So they covered about, the Gambia is a small country, we have about 6-7 regions. They covered about 4-5 regions in the initial project. And we as a ministry, using the Life AR, want to cover the remaining 2 regions to work with communities to decide for themselves, work with their active participation, and of course they will take the lead in planning and implementation. So we have learned this lesson, that is participatory planning and participatory analysis from the local approach, and it is quite fitting. The end result is that the capacities of government at every level is strengthened, And capacity building raises expectations of the government and local government authorities and from others. It raises ambition of what we in the Gambia are planning to deliver and able to achieve. Actually, what local wants is to improve the climate finance delivery mechanism, whereby the issues of bureaucracy and the late timeliness would be addressed, so that finance reaches the communities as quickly as possible and in adequate amounts. Because we learned that through the process, through the bureaucratic process, finance that reaches the communities is always very low. Some would say only 10% of committed or pledged funds. So I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mamadou. I was going to invite you to take a seat over here if you would like to join us on the panel for later. And some excellent examples there, but Local and Life AR on exactly that locally led aspect. We just need to make sure that we're shortening the finance delivery mechanisms to get that funding available, so it's these initiatives can speed up. We're going to have the change in agenda as we had thought, so if you wouldn't mind joining us now. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh Dong, delighted to be joined by you today.
All right, good afternoon. It's the afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I know we're getting to the end of our cup here, but the energy is still vibrant here in Dubai. And as a friend of mine used to say, afternoon session is the cemetery of public speaking, because we all had lunch and the energy is winding down. Let me bring in the perspective of Africa by focusing on three aspects, I think, which is extremely relevant to the conversation, loss and damage. What is the problem we're trying to address on the continent? And then second, what are we doing about it as the African risk capacity? And since we're talking about loss and damage, what are some of the big ideas we're putting on the table as the African continent so we can be part of the solution? Like in any problem, it's always important to understand what is the problem that we're trying to address on the continent. I often say there's a human face to climate change, and that is the drought in the Horn of Africa, with a lot of people losing their assets, life and livelihood. There is the tropical cyclone in Madagascar and Mozambique, with infrastructure being destroyed. But there's also the drought in the Sahel, where a lot of people are affected by drought, but also the loss of assets and so on. So what all these disasters have in common, it is what I call the human face of climate change. We should be inspired by the situation. People see what do we need to do and do it differently so we can at least affect the life of many Africans. Now, in the African continent, there is what we call African solution to African problems. So we're not just waiting for loss and damage to be part of the solution, and that's the reason why the African Union decided 10 years ago to launch my institution called the African Risk Capacity, with the sole objective of helping Africans, A, to show leadership, but second, to anticipate before it's too late. And that anticipation is, number one, to make sure we use technology and innovation to profile the risk that we're exposed to when they come to drought, tropical cyclone, and flood. And that information is extremely critical because it allows our policymakers to decide what to do with that risk, but more importantly, whether they decide to transfer the risk to the insurance market so we can mobilize additional resources to help Africans who are affected by disasters. The innovation comes from the fact that the insurance market today is an opportunity to mobilize resources rapidly so that the response of African countries is actually fully funded, as opposed to waiting till it happens and maybe too late. What I have just described to you is no longer just a concept. For us, it's the reality. 10 years ago, when we launched the African Risk Capacity, many people did not believe that you could leverage the insurance market to mobilize resources to respond to disasters where it happened. Fast forward 10 years later, we provided up to $1 billion worth of coverage, about $150 million of payout, but more importantly, 150 Africans have been protected because of what we do. So it's no longer a concept we're just selling, it's something we've done. The question is, what does it take to actually scale up what I just described to you so that no African is left behind? And that brings me to my two big ideas, which I hope the loss and damage will take into account. Number one, the intervention of disaster risk management is actually holistic. It's not just providing capital or funding. It's helping Africans to mainstream early warning system because they do save lives. It's building the capacities of African governments so they can embed disaster risk management into their public policies, but also leveraging the insurance market, coming up with innovative financing, and that is social protections, solidarity funding. So all these things combined certainly will make it possible for Africans to build a sustainable and a strong disaster risk management financing going forward. So I'm hoping the Loss and Damage Fund will provide the necessary resources so we can put together what I could call an Africa Climate Preparedness Facility so we can support the initiative of Africans. Last but not least, I am not implying that insurance is the only answer. There are cases where the insurance may not be actually suitable to respond. Social safety nets, solidarity fund, contingency funding, these are other mechanisms that could be utilized in making sure that Africans strengthen their capability of responding. So that insurance, unfortunately, the affordability of premium is such that some countries, even if they believe in transferring the risk insurance market, can't afford to pay the premium. So what we do at African Risk Capacity is mobilize resources, providing subsidies where necessary, so government can see the benefit of insurance and eventually protecting lives. So my plea and my hope is that the Loss and Damage Fund, we don't get lost in the governance. Whatever governance put in place has to work for Africa, nimble, accessible, available in a way that the funding that we hear in the millions are actually available to those who need them. I'm also hoping that the procedures will not be cumbersome to the extent that you may hear the millions, but they may not get to where it's needed. Last but not least, we need to mainstream early warning system and make innovative financing available so no one is left behind. In doing so, support what we call African solution to African problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and everybody's being very good and remaining bang on time. So thank you to all of my speakers, and I think more kind of excellent. The solutions are out there. We don't need to be constantly looking to reinvent the wheel and look for new innovative solutions. They're there. What we need to look at is getting the funding in place in order to support them all. I would like now to call on the Minister of Finance from Tonga. Thank you very much for. I know you're extremely busy and caught up in negotiations and other high-level events, so thank you for making the time to be with us today. So may I ask you to take a spot at the podium and then join us afterwards. So.
Excellencies, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organizers for this invitation extended to me to speak at this high-level event on this very important topic. Tonga is highly vulnerable to natural hazards and extreme weather events. Being a developing country with a less diversified economy, our financial capacity to cope with the economic impacts of natural disasters is limited. And these disasters are now more frequent and highly impactful, further aggravating our challenges around physical management, and development gains are quickly eroded. Tonga, through the Ministry of Finance, has put in place a disaster risk financing strategy that includes various financing options. These work at the macro, meso, and micro levels so that it is an integrated approach to address financial needs post-disasters. The Tonga TRF strategy 2021-2025 is a comprehensive policy document with clear guidelines on pre-arranged ex-ante and ex-post financing mechanisms that we will use. Under the TRF strategy, we have set up the contingent fund, that is through budget support, and a national emergency fund with an annual appropriation of Tongan Paanga 5 million, which is the equivalent of about $2.5 US. Tonga also has access to the Asian Development Bank contingent financing with a limit of US $10 million. Tonga is one of the first countries and continues to purchase the sovereign risk insurance cover from the Pacific Catastrophe Risk Insurance Company that covers tropical cyclones, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Tonga can receive a maximum of US $6.9 million per year, and so far we have received 3 payouts of 1.3 million of these amounts from various disasters. No doubt, these timely payments received from PICRIC have assisted the government of Tonga to support recovery efforts and aid to affected vulnerable populations. Tonga is also one of the first countries in the Pacific to offer parametric microinsurance to low-income households, predominantly smallholders, farmers, and small businesses comprising mostly women. From 2022, through partnership between the EU and Capital Development Fund, in partnership with the UN University Institute of Environment and Human Security in the Tonga Development Bank, a very innovative low-cost parametric microinsurance is being offered to cover risks against tropical cyclones. A local insurance company is underwriting the risk with reinsurance arranged through a global reinsurer. This is a very solid example of how market mechanisms through private sector engagement and supported by development agencies like UNCDF and UNU EHS can offer solutions and help climate vulnerable countries like Tonga face the omnipresent challenges. We also see this approach of macro, meso, and micro risk transfer instruments as an effective way of addressing and minimizing loss and damage. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that a basket of appropriate and fit-for-purpose financing mechanisms have to be made available and accessed by countries to effectively satisfy its disaster financing needs. Malo.
Thank you, Minister. I can invite you to take a seat over here on the panel, if that's okay. So we are a little ahead of schedule, and one of our, well, the moderator for the next panel, Dr. Mahmoud Moeddin, is a little bit delayed. So we're going to open up now and giving up the people in the room a chance to ask questions. And I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty seeing over into the IT corner if there are questions that have come through online, or people were waiting for a later point, but feel free, please, to put your questions in on social media platforms. And if anybody in the room, I believe there is a roving mic available.
We don't have any questions from the social media platforms.
So throw it open to anybody in the room. As we know it's the graveyard shift. We say the post-lunch second week on top. But
There you go.
question over here, thank you.
Hi, my name is Arushi, and I'm a graduate student at the Fletcher School in Boston. I'm sorry, I joined a little late, so I don't know if this has been addressed already, but I was wondering if you could speak a little to what the kinds of innovation you expect to see in blended finance structures that would make loss and damage more amenable to the private sector.
Is that to anybody in particular, or whoever would like to take it?
No, that's a broad question.
Thank you.
I think when it comes to loss and damage, there's certainly a couple of angles to cover. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, it is important to get all this commitment in the millions. So hopefully by the time that we leave Dubai, we get the final number, how much has been committed, and that's a good start in terms of at least financial commitment. I think the biggest concern for many of us, number one, is the governance. I understand there is a compromise to ask the World Bank on a temporary basis to manage the fund for 4 years, as we think about a long-term solution and much more sustainable to make sure at least the loss and damage has a home beyond just the World Bank, and that's, in my view, the good start just to get the fund be operational. I think the second challenge is the procedures. The existing fund, like GCF and others, where depending on whom you talk to, there's a lot of frustration about the accessibility of the fund is not as fast as we want to. And that's the reason why I always talked about the AAA of climate finance: availability, accessibility, and affordability. There is no point of having funds that have been announced in the millions and the billions if they're not available to us. So hopefully we can learn from previous funds to make sure we can expedite these procedures in a way they're not too cumbersome. But I think ultimately, with regard to the private sector, it's not only sovereign insurance or sovereign money that's needed. We also need to leverage the private sector in the particular case of insurance, basically the local private sector, as well as the international private sector. They may have some solutions that can provide innovation, bring in additional resources so that we can respond quickly. The beauty of insurance, not necessarily something that I'm promoting for all the solutions, is the fact that in the business of loss and damage, time matters. When there's a disaster, every second counts. If you come in too late with the money, you may lose some life, and that's the reason why innovation, fast, and speed is extremely important. And that's the only way we can actually repair the damage and the loss to make sure no one is left behind.
Thank you. Any other questions from the room? If not, I have a, yep, please. Oh, sorry, there's somebody behind you. Got in there quickly. They're closer to the mic.
Thank you. My name is Jefferson F. Yanebo from Liberia. Bradion, your presentation is heart-winning. But I want to say something before I ask my question. Some of us as African countries are fully cognizant of what he said, the preparations, the pre-preparations that Africa has been making for any eventuality, even though our capacities are weak. And it's on the basis of this that we develop, all of us are supporting the development of UNCDF. Because like he said, we write proposals to the JEF and to the LCDF, and it takes 2 years to review, 2 years to reply to us that your proposal is disqualified. And in the course of 2 years, we have lost over 30,000, 40,000 lives while we are waiting for proposal approval. It's hurting us. So I just heard you saying that the loss and damage fund initially will be channeled through, I didn't get the name of the institution.
World Bank.
Say that?
The World Bank.
World Bank. Well, as a continent, we are supporting the UNCDF because we think it's a fast mechanism to filter and intervene in our situation and circumstances timely enough. The World Bank coming in as an initial institution to handle the loss and damage funds. What's going to be the linkages between the World Bank and our daring UNCDF? Thank you.
I don't want to be the only one answering questions, so maybe if anyone else on the panel want to, otherwise I'd be happy to give my perspective. It's up to you, Madam Moderator.
Anybody else like to put up their hand? I can also, I'm happy to contribute a little bit as well if I'm allowed as moderator.
Okay, should I?
Maybe you go first.
I mean, first of all, the decision to ask the World Bank to manage the loss and damage was not my decision. All of us has to live with it. But my understanding is that the transitional committee that was set up at COP27 had to make a proposal to COP28 about the governance of the fund. Everybody wanted the fund to be operational immediately, and at that time the bank was chosen as a consensus to get started for the next 4 years as we think about the much more permanent and sustainable governance structure. Now, I came from the World Bank for 10 years. I'm not here to defend the World Bank, just for the record. But what I'm saying is, at least as long as it's a transition toward a longer-term solution, I don't think it should be a problem, because ultimately, the fund will be run by a board, and the board has the mandate and the power to decide what the fund will be doing, not the World Bank. So the World Bank is just a trustee, but ultimately, what the fund will be doing is decided by the board. I think second, just to, again, the existing funds have been quite slow that we can learn a lot from. GCF is one of them. So hopefully, as we set up the procedures of the fund, we'll make sure that we don't make the same mistake that was made in the past, and make sure that accessibility is actually defined. I think beyond governance and procedures, my question is, what would you do with the money? And to me, as I said earlier, mainstreaming early warning system is going to be extremely critical, because it saves lives for policymakers to have data to make informed decisions. Second, contingency planning within our governments will help us to come up with something much more sustainable. And last but not least, innovating the way we provide funding, because in the case of disaster, every second counts. So let's not lose sight of the governance issues to where the money will be going to. And I think that's what we can claim in COP29, that the fund has been instrumental in saving lives. Again, for the record, I don't work for the World Bank, and the World Bank will defend itself, but that's my understanding.
Thank you, Ibrahima. Yeah, and I have to say, look, I come from the NGO world very, very recently, so I have zero affiliation to any of the institutions, but I have been at a number of events, and there is absolute recognition on behalf of the funds that they need to improve and that they will improve. And last night I was at the launch of an event that Ireland is endorsing, which is around a coalition of ambition on adaptation finance, and one of the key streams out of that is the whole issue of improving the accessibility and ease of finance, and there will like-minded countries, and LDCs and SIDS are all part of that coalition of ambition, and we will be working extremely hard to ensure that these funds are being dispersed and made available much more easily.
Yeah, I think I echoed the statement made by my colleagues from the front. I think I was in a panel with the Vice President of the World Bank that will handle the fund, and they said he explained how they will work, how it will work, which they will provide a back office to the fund. But it will, as mentioned by the chair, it will depend very much on the governance established by the board that will be appointed soon. So everyone is aware of the need to access the funding, and also there will be looking at something like a simplified application and how it will work, but that will be determined by the board, taking into account the lessons learned from what we've been experienced. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, sorry, just before you ask your question, we have been joined by Dr. Mahmoud Moyadeen, who I would like to invite to join us up here for this part of the session and to moderate this lot of questions. If I may.
Right. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some reflections and help moderating this session. And apology that I came just now after some good, exciting moments with children from around the world with their solutions. And many of them spoke in different ways about the concerns of the loss and damage, including requests from some countries affected by the severe weather conditions and floods in particular, loss of lives of members of families that required attention. While we are focusing very much on the loss and damage in the rescue and rehabilitation in the urgent ways that should really be the case after the full operationalization of the loss and damage fund, but there are some demands that we'll never know about unless we are engaged adequately at the local level, including a request from a young student asking for psychiatric help for herself and her parents after losing members of the family. But This COP in particular started strong with the loss and damage announcement of its operationalization in the first minute. So what happened last minute in Sharm el-Sheikh, when many of us were there, got that good response in the first minute of this COP, which was a good surprise. Now, for this loss and damage to be fully, effectively operationalized, that would require the formation of its board, and the majority of its board are going to be coming from developing economies, which is a good proposal that was endorsed. The second part should really be, and parallel to that, adequately funded and supported. So the numbers of the hundreds of millions so far are there to support the contribution to its administrative costs. The actual losses and damages, and no one really has a figure or even a guesstimate of how much per annum the losses and damages are. That will start when we are going to be transforming our discussion from the loss and damage to the losses and damages. That had been really an issue that nobody did tackling because we didn't really have the vehicle to do that. So this will be a helpful work from this fund. What we are expecting as well is the fast mobilization of resources, including technical assessments, surveying the sites that could be affected by damages, and mobilizing resources from this fund and partnerships in order to have the immediate kind of support required. The cases that we have been seeing around the world, from the east to the west to the north to the south, including what happened just before COP27 and the disaster of floods in Pakistan, that was very much instrumental actually to bring cases from real life while the negotiators were busy about their best paragraph and best line that should really suit their political positions. We have seen really the good narratives from local communities impacted, feeding the argument, the discussions, and for the 4+1 meetings for the transitional committee, they benefited from consultation with communities. Localization have been a winner in this COP by having more than 1,000 mayors in the meeting rooms, including during the last couple of days. Issues related to access to technology, access to finance, empowering when it comes to governance, access to international organizations without complications from the capitals, and capitals could be either within a centralized or a federalized system, had been very much on the top of the agenda. But I'm not here to speak, I'm here to moderate. We've been in many panels together, so I'm getting a tip or two from you. Why don't we start by you? I don't know if you responded already to any questions or comments, because I entered while you were already engaging in a very lively discussion.
There were two questions, but there are lots of hands up, so we get back out.
So we'll go to the floor first, and then we'll go to the panel. That's more inclusive and democratic. Thank you. So we'll ask for the usual, to be brief, to start by your good name, your affiliation, if you insist. All right? Microphone, please.
Yes, it's here.
No, we'll start with the first, with the first line, if you can pass the microphone, and then we'll come back directly to you. Thank you so much, sir. I know it's hard when you have the microphone in your hand and it's being taken from you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes. My name is David Jackson from UN Capital Development Fund, and I have two very short questions on the loss and damage. Firstly, it seems to me that for this to be a permanent mechanism, it has to be some kind of filter, but it has to be built into the fiscal architecture. So ideally, the loss and damage fund would not only be topped up by financial contributions from member states, but it would also be some kind of fiscal top-up, maybe some tax on aviation fuel, maybe some other kind of fiscal mechanism that would provide a permanent input into this fund, so it became a permanent feature. I think that's very important. I know Denmark is looking at this, and we're working with some countries on this, but that's a very important feature, I think, some way to get some permanent fiscal funding of this loss and damage fund.
You refer to Mark? Hmm? You refer to
Well, I mentioned Denmark.
Denmark.
I'm
no
aware
problem.
that Denmark
Okay.
is looking at
Sorry.
some
After
ship.
many sessions, you get
Yeah.
some hearing problems.
I'm
like
aware
mine.
that the government of
So
Denmark,
Denmark is working.
looking at some possible shipping
Okay.
or aviation fuel. But there are very many other nations looking at this. And then the second point I wanted to make is, of course, once the money is in there, the filter to disperse, I think it's very important that we learn the lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic that taught us what are the essential institutions when there's an emergency. And, you know, it was not the institutions that we thought. The police sometimes, the local governments in particular, you know, there were a variety of institutions that were able to respond, and we learned how to respond. And I think it's important the Loss and Damage Fund channels resources through existing national mechanisms to existing institutions that know how to deal with an emergency. And I'm going to give you one very quick example of what can go right, what can go wrong in the same disaster, just separated by a decade. I was part of I watched the disaster, flooding on the Zambezi River in the year about 1999, and the local governments and the police, the army were mobilized out of the barracks, and there was a very quick response using local resources. 10 years later, it was designated to the donor community, and the response never came.
Right.
So that's my point. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I think to be more inclusive, perhaps we'll get 3 questions from the floor, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond, not to waste too much time in the interactions. And then you mentioned Denmark, but in my background there was Mark. Why? Because there is a gentleman by the name of Mark Sadler, who is going to be the convener in the short term at least to get this loss and damage fund established. He's a World Bank member of staff with a great deal of experience. So he's going to be one of the people helping in shaping this vehicle at the bank. And some of you may recall that when the president of the World Bank was here, he said that he's going to make this fund operational within 90 days. And in a meeting yesterday in Barbados, Steve Hammer, who was at the World Bank until 8 days ago, and in the finance and climate team, he said the president meant 90 days from the establishment of the composition of the board. So here, the ball is back in the court of the countries to nominate their candidates. You'll have a board to be established. They have a mandate. If you see the documents, it's about 20 plus areas of action that are the responsibilities of this new competent board. But your 2 questions, I'll ask the panelists to go back to this. Very specific. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
You say that as long to the loss and damage fund is temporary in the World Bank, everything is really okay. But we already know the history. One of the examples is, for example, the Global Partnership for Education that was hosted by the World Bank about 20 years. But for over 12 years of that, had been in discussion that if it's still there, it will be still there, or what is going to happen with that. So we know the history. So where that blind faith is coming now, and you say that as long we know where the money is go. So what's happened when the World Bank is really expensive? So where that faith is coming?
Very good. Legitimate concerns supported by history of other funds that we need to learn from, but we'll go back to that, and I have perhaps a couple of reactions. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kojo Yauvi, and one of the organization called Action for Development of Sahel. And I thank every one of you here, and I'm highly delighted to hear about the mobilization of the fund, which is dedicated to loss and damage. That we know, every one of us here, that one of the continents which is highly touched by this event is Africa. And sometimes the response are delayed, even when to give the application is very difficult. My question is, which mechanism the World Bank, which is the place that we lead the funds, we put in place for those that we benefit, most especially the local communities which face the situation will have access to that fund. And is it the fund will be sent only for loss and damage, and we will not think about prevention more than cure? That is, I will stop there before.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yes, perhaps we can get a couple of questions from the right. So 3 plus 2, sorry, I said 3, so 3 plus 2. And then we'll go back there after your reactions. And we need to finish in 2:45. Yeah, we'll get 2 questions. I'll come back to you. 2 questions. Yes, ma'am, and the gentleman. Microphone, please. Okay, very good. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Your name, please?
All right. My name is Silosius Chaturuka from Zimbabwe.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you very much for the presentation so far. But I've got a question pertaining to the management of the fund by the World Bank.
Okay.
Because there has been a call, especially on the SDGs front, that the current international financial architecture needs to be reconfigured. So I'm not sure whether, in terms of this loss and damage, the architecture would have changed or shifted to suit the changing needs, because there has been an outcry along those lines. And also, we have also noticed that we are focusing on the loss and damage as a fund. But what efforts are there, and how much on the side of the causes of the losses is being done to reduce that? Because in as much as we may want to focus on the losses that have been caused, but those countries that are actually causing the losses, what exactly is being done to address that? Because otherwise we will end up making efforts, raising more money, but the cause of the problem being maintained. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Hi, my name is Avais Khalid. I'm from Pakistan, currently a graduate student at the Indiana University. We've spoken a lot about how the current funding in the loss and damage fund is quite limited, and a significant amount of that money is going to go to the World Bank for their fees for their offices in DC. My question is specifically how do you think the remaining money should be distributed? Who gets the money first? Do we think about countries, for example, like Pakistan, who were faced by floods and had 33 million people underwater, or should we think about coastal communities that are being affected incrementally day by day because of losses and damages that are being incurred?
Right. Okay. What a round of good questions. I'm expecting great answers to them, or at least attempts to answer them. So let me start by you, Brahim.
I mean, as I said earlier, even though I'm a former World Bank official, I am not speaking on behalf of the World Bank, just for the record, but let me give my views. I think there are a couple of things that came out which are a very good point, and I refer to your question about sustainability, but also local content. I think on the sustainability front, it is absolutely important as we mobilize money to repair the damage so we can save lives. Think about the sustainability of the fund in the long run. So we don't wait actually when the money runs out, think about what is an innovative way to mobilize additional resources so we can have a much more sustainable flow of funding. So hopefully when the board is put together, as they put their strategy, the issue about sustainability will be on the forefront of how do you actually mobilize a flow of funding so we can actually support the demand, which is going to be huge. But in the meantime, as I say, because of the human face of loss and damage, we can't wait till the innovation comes in to be able to begin to take some action. So we can do 2 things at the same time by acting immediately to save life while we think about a much more sustainable way. I think second, it is absolutely critical to understand life does not start with loss and damage fund. The organization, both domestically and regionally, have been doing this for a number of years. So part of the solution has to be to empower this institution and make sure they can be part of the solution. So you can build ownership. So the idea of having local content is going to be extremely critical. And I hope organizations like ours will be providing additional resources so we can scale up our intervention to make sure we can be part of the solution. With regard to the World Bank, I think there's a bit of a misperception there. Let's just say it again. The reality is the bank served, my understanding, as a back office to the fund. The accountability and the governance lies on the board of the fund, and they will decide what to do with the money and where. So I think if there's any institution to hold accountable, is the board, not necessarily the World Bank. Now, whether the bank is going to be charging some fees, that's what it takes to manage a fund, and I think ultimately it's really important after 4 years we'll learn the lessons and make sure when we find a much more permanent solution to the fund beyond the bank, it's not going to be about the World Bank, it's about what we're trying to do. It's not about the World Bank, it's about the people that we have to save, and let's just not lose sight of that. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Right. Very good comments here about the issues about perception and reality and to what extent the new fund is going to be enjoying autonomy. I encourage everyone, please, to consult a structure that this fund is going to be established under, which is not a trust fund. It's a financial intermediary fund, which is called FIF. There are some examples on that, 20 examples plus. So consult them, and perhaps you need to come back as well with ideas while the board is being formed about the expectations. I'm not asking you at all to relax your concerns, be concerned, substantiate these concerns with the history that was mentioned there in order to make sure that this new fund is going to learn from the lessons, many positive lessons, but many negative lessons as well, for this fund to be independent, effective, and able to have as well the capacity to be on its feet, to be hosted in its new location, because the understanding there's going to be temporarily hosted there, and there's going to be moving to another location, and there are a couple of proposals, serious proposals, to host this fund there. Let me ask the Excellencies and the Honorable Ministers to take the floor, and I would be very happy if you localize the answers as well, or responses to what you heard, or perhaps you want to compliment on what you started at the beginning as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the questions being raised is always a very common questions asked, and coming from a small island developing state, it is the same concern that has been shared. But I understand that the formation of the L&D governing board includes 2 seats from the small island developing states that will be a member of the board. So as we are from Tonga, we will work very closely with our representatives to the board to make sure that what we, from the lessons learned in the past, and what to also share our concern to raise in the board. And I think with all the countries, they are fully aware of the issues with regard to the access to finance and also the complex application. So we trust that the board will do our best for us, whoever we will appoint them to the board. But the issues are raised on the governing board, on the World Bank. I can't say much because I'm the governor for the World Bank in my country, but it is an issue that us governors can also raise to make sure that the access to financing in the annual meetings are maintained, and also to deal with the issue to address the L&D damage. But I think I agree with the local-led initiatives that will help the adaptation, and which may come with a risk transfer, such as insurance. They will also help. So I think for countries is start working now on how they are going to deal with the issues in their own countries, and what kind of initiatives they would like to put through. But we will, it is something that I think is up to the board, and we have representatives there that will deal with them closely to make sure they share our voices, and also as governor of the bank, we will also raise some concerns to management, bank management, on their role in back office role with this fund. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. And perhaps in reaction to that, being a governor as well, and you'll be having your next meetings in April. These are the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. Now, with this strong announcement of the President of the World Bank, if we assume that matters are going on track, that the board is nominated by mid-January or maximum by end of January, the 90 days rule might really be a good reference for a good conversation between you and the President of the World Bank. This is one. Second, yes, 2 seats from small islands, but there are representations as well from developing economies and emerging markets that make the majority of the board, and there are many common issues of concern with the rest of the developing economies. And the good news is, given that I've been the board of these institutions, chairing them or member of one of them, decisions are being made by consensus normally. Votes happen occasionally and if needed and when needed. So I think given this consensus rule, 1 or 2 seats are powerful enough, and you can always, your representative can use the consensus rule and the minority privileges in that matter. Right, Honorable Minister. Thank you. Any reactions, sir? Thank you. Do you like to take the floor? Do you have any reactions to what was raised already? Excellency?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Maybe I'll take the floor now. And I think I'll share what I have to share, and I won't be too far away from what I presented earlier on. I will continue to stick to what I have presented. And to all acknowledge the time needed to set in place the technicalities and bureaucratic processes needed in place before fully operationalizing the loss and damage fund, as we've heard. So, somehow, to while when the LDCs, SIDS, and vulnerable countries are continuously suffering the brunt and impact of climate change. The IPCC's or the science has informed us and indicated the way the compass is spinning, and yet, having listened to the discussions in the room, we are still concerned on the architecture of the funding mechanisms, which is critical and crucial. But our cry for attention on maximizing means to access climate finance available under the current arrangements we've heard never change. Coming from a scientific background, we believe in complications and prognosis of situations, and this is exactly the message I want to share. And I think it also reflects some of the questions that have been shared this morning, this afternoon from the floor. And it's that fear of not being able to reverse and replace the damages that climate change is going to impact, not only in our vulnerable countries, but in the world, on a global level. So my contribution is in a way to share. I think as countries wait for these technical mechanisms to take place or to get fully operationalized, I also want to share that in countries like Tuvalu, we have some innovative measures. Because of the delays and the difficulty in accessing climate finance at the right time or when it is needed, Tuvalu set up what is called a Tuvalu Climate Survival Fund. It's not in millions, in big amounts, but it's enough to address the immediate impacts while we await the promised financing mechanisms that are available. And I'm talking about some that we've been trying to access, like the Green Climate Fund. Yes, we've managed to have assistance through those funding mechanisms. But as mentioned, I recall when we tried to send in a project proposal, it was like in 2015, and in 2019 we were accredited. We got assistance through some MIEs or multilateral implementing entities, because we don't have a national implementing entity. And it's only like after 8 years, that was when I was in government. When I'm out of government, the fund that we have access to is still not reaching us. And after 8 years, it's on the ground. So I share the same sentiment that's been shared on the hardships that we face in countries at the forefront of climate change. And we hope that while we're taking time to ensure we have the right architecture and the funding mechanisms we have before we operationalize the funds, we also have mandates to ensure that we deliver with other funding mechanisms available in a way that countries can avoid overspending on the cost of the loss and damages they have and they are affected with by climate change at the cost of their competing national interests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much on bringing this experience from the field and your experience in government and your experience now. And there are issues about cost effectiveness and guiding the policymakers and innovative solutions that need to be scaled up. But perhaps in this round, without imposing direction on your comments or questions, given that the fund has already been formed, we're not challenging that now. The decision has been made. After many deliberations and discussions, 4 meetings in Egypt, 1 meeting here in Abu Dhabi, it was thought that this could be the best vehicle, being practical and knowing the institution called the World Bank, what they can offer and what they may not, guarding the institution from any unnecessary intervention, getting the governance right. There is a sunset clause for this institution to start its operation fast and disbursement fast. There will be new dynamics, especially on the emphasis on the prevention, not the cure, especially in areas related to adaptation. But if you have, assume here that you have the co-chairs of the fund with you, and that could really be summarized and shared. What are your specific expectations from the early days of operation of this institution? Of course, there will be more formal ways in governance and feedback, but given that every kind of experience from the field helps, and this is the power of localized knowledge, direct experience that could be shared, it could be definitely put in a form of more formal way for the new setup to benefit from. In addition to any question that you may have still in the floor, I'd like really to get guidance from you, expectations from you on how this fund should really function and partner with either you have an institution or an organization or are affiliated with one of them, or just following this issue because of experience or in partnership. That would be very, very useful. Digging back in the past, which is just few days or an hour before the establishment of this COP because the decision was already been made. A fund established last year, operationalized starting with this COP. There's going to be a board with the responsibilities, with co-chairs. What you are expecting for this fund to function? Yes, we know World Bank is not a perfect organization, but please let me aware of one perfect organization and we start to emulate somewhere else. Right. But it's good in many aspects, working there in 10 years before. I can tell you it can do good, good work with good partnership. And I give you examples of what worked. Yes. Yes. It doesn't need to be just reactions. Even if you have questions still, please. Yes, ma'am. Microphone there. 2. Any questions from the right?
I'm Millie from Vanuatu. I
Yep.
really appreciate you asking this question
Yep.
because our tropical cyclone are really up to chance. And as the water gets warmer, the cyclone gets more extreme and catastrophic. So this year alone, in March, we had 2 TC5, category 4 and 5, one on Monday, one on Wednesday. And then last month, we had a category 5 again. So many of our islands are hit and our infrastructure broken. So I guess I wanted to say maybe one way is to really bridge the gap with our existing infrastructure within a country. So is there a way maybe your fund could engage our Rural Development Bank? I'm currently on the board. And so that's something that we could actually have a distribution channel and to help us, realize, because we have agency as well. So we're trying to develop our own risk model. But these are topics that we didn't really have to consider before. And being in a developing environment, it's actually really hard to prioritize development, risk, and abatement, and mitigation. So if there's a mechanism in which you could engage us locally, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Great. They, not us. They. I'll be speaking on your behalf. Otherwise, you'll see me next time. You will hold me accountable. I could be accountable for other things that I can share with you later, but definitely it is. But my responsibility is through the team and the excellent work in the organization of this meeting. We need to have a summary with very specific asks and list of concerns as well to be reflected, and that could be shared informally through me, but definitely through a very well-recognized organization within the mother organization, the UNCDF, caring for the needs of the vulnerable and low-income countries in particular. So they have a concern on that, and they have as well as taken the game because of risks, issues with that. But I'll come back to you on this. But you raise a very important issue on partnership between existing mechanism in the field and local areas, and how can that be more effectively done, and that could be emulated somewhere else. There was a question, 2 questions now. 1, 2. Okay. In the blue, please. You have a microphone.
Thank you all for spending your time with us today. Really appreciate your input and insights. My name is Rennie. I'm from the Yale Student Environment Coalition in the United States. We know that the new fund needs to be funded now that it's been set up, of course, and that the best way to do that would be with public contributions from the countries who have created the problem, like the United States. But of course, the United States is not pulling its weight in that area. And then in the same meeting that you referenced yesterday, sir, with Avinash Prasad, he mentioned that while insurance and risk sharing would be a good mechanism, possibly in the short term, in the long term, after paying all of those premiums, the insurance companies would likely just drop out when you needed it most. So I'm wondering, in the immediate term, let's say, and then in the long term, what other ways of funding or what other innovative sources of funding do you see being useful here? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time. I think she has tackled what I wanted to, to ask. My name is Kate from Uganda, East Africa. I wanted to find out what are the mechanisms that you're thinking, okay, we should think around replenishing this fund, because many countries are looking at it, and at a certain point it will get done. So what mechanisms do we, sustainable mechanisms do we have to replenish this fund? Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Can we take those three reactions and then come back and we'll finish on time. Don't worry about time. We'll finish on time exact. But Ibrahim, I'll put you on the spot, but can I facilitate that or complicate that now?
Sure, I'm used to it.
There was a question that was raised yesterday to the co-chairs of finance. As you rightly mentioned, extreme weather conditions, climate change impact, thanks to science, are more or less more predictable than before. Not with the exact date and time, but we know. At the same time, we don't have the resources, finance, technical, and otherwise, that are mobilized sufficiently to deal with these known risks with probabilities of existence. We are not going to be misled by saying, well, it's uncertain. No, it's certain that there will be high risk in this particular area. But the mechanism that we have so far is basically about the intermittent finance. It's the occasional funding. It's the fundraising when, God forbid, to happen again in the cases of floods or fires in some particular countries at scale, as we have seen, for instance, in Pakistan. The case happened, and then the mobilization when the humanitarian system of the UN tried to intervene. Estimates of cost beyond lives that cannot really be costed or valued or priced, but here about damages to livelihoods and properties were in the neighborhood of 30 billion to 40 billion plus. And what was mobilized is a very tiny, small fraction of what's needed until this moment, despite the intervention of the Secretary General of the UN going himself to some replenishment occasions and events. Here we have an expert on risk management working in an environment that required this kind. This is what he deals with. This is what his passion is for. But everybody now is talking about this new ways of funding. I was the facilitator of the Green Climate Fund. Everybody celebrated the $13 billion of replenishment. Many thanks to the countries that contributed, and many thanks to the countries benefited from the GCF, pushing the contributors to contribute more. So everybody who has taken this, thank you so much for this. But I can tell you out of experience, for almost a year trying to do this, it was an uphill struggle. It's not easy as it used to be, even to get just the pledge. I'm not talking about these pledges to be translated into funding. If this is the Green Climate Fund as an example, is for it to invest in the prevention, in mitigation, and in the adaptation. But this fund is very different. It cannot really be with the luxury of waiting for a cycle for 6-9 months for replenishment. And as I said, unfortunately, these crises, when they happen, they take the news for a couple of days, couple of weeks, and then we go, unfortunately, into another disaster, another crisis. So what could be the solutions? Simple question to a man who had seen complexities in operation.
I don't expect anything less from you.
And built on the three interventions here, one more another, including actually solutions through local partnerships. Absolutely. And having more steady flow, and then the insurance. So I get the local from here, I get the insurance possibilities from the second, and you said more, but I just picked this point. And of course, how can we do better in the replenishment processes that are leaving a lot to be desired?
When I was told you're going to be moderating, I know you're going to put me on the spot many times.
Well, it's good to moderate from time to time. Time for revenge.
I think that there are a couple of points that have been made, and I wish when the board of the Loss and Damage Fund is up and running, they will listen to this conversation. Hopefully we'll show them the video.
Yeah.
Because you brought up two issues, which obviously it's an evolving process. Number one is the sustainable fundraising of the fund. The announcements made here are very encouraging, they're very uplifting, but obviously it's the beginning of the process. I'm hoping that when the board is up and running, the first thing they have to put on the table, how do we come up with the sustainable fundraising beyond just the announcement? Because the demand is such that obviously a couple $1 million is not going to help us to meet the demand. I think the second priority for the board would be that once we get the money, what are we going to do with the money? What's the strategy? What are the pillars? What are the program of work? So hopefully the board will look at that as well. But while we're doing that, there are a couple of points that brought up which I think are important. And I think brought up from Vanuatu, and that is to say, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Disaster does not mean the same thing to all of our countries. So I'm hoping that whatever resource we're going to make available will be demand-driven, not supply-driven, to make sure the resources that we provide respond to the demand of our countries. Some deal with tropical cyclones, some with floods, some with drought. So hopefully we'll get to what I call a multi-hazard, multi-year intervention so we can protect the life and livelihood. I think second criteria, equally important. Whatever we decide, in my view, should be guided what I call the human face of disasters. That is a livelihood that we protect, that's the infrastructure that we protect, so that to the extent at least we can claim success in terms of the impact, as opposed to remaining at these governance discussions and not be able to show something that where we've actually been successful. I think there are a couple of winning areas which I believe we can all agree as important. Number one, and I think you brought it up earlier, today, given the advancement and the progress we've made in technology innovation, we should actively mainstream what I call risk profiling to help all of our countries at least have a good understanding of what they're exposed to. You cannot address a problem unless you know what exactly is the problem. So the idea of mainstreaming early warning system risk profiling, this is something certainly we should make available to all developing countries, Africa included. And I hope the loss and damage will support that exercise as well. I think second, when you come to the insurance market, again, let me make it absolutely clear, it's not the only answer. The advantage of the insurance market is that through a premium facility, through a risk pooling, you can access the resources in as fast as possible, so your first response is actually funded off your government budget so you can save lives. But now I am also mindful that insurance is not always affordable, and that's why I'm hoping the loss and damage will make at least subsidies mainstream to the extent that countries who can't afford to pay the premium could be actually subsidized to the extent we can build the culture of disasters management and financing to the insurance market. I think last but not least, let's also think about other financial instruments, cat bonds, solidarity funding, social protection facilities, whereby you can actually couple the insurance solution to other funding instruments, so together we can actually strengthen the capability of government to respond. At the end of the day, the human face of loss and damage should be inspiring all of our intervention. Everything else is technical when it comes to lives of people, and I think that's the message that I will convey to the board if I have the chance to speak to them.
Very good. We have less than 3 minutes, and then the broadcasting of this important event will end. So I'd like to give quick reactions on agreement and disagreement with what my good brother Ibrahima just shared with us. I'd be happy if you agree with him, happier if you don't disagree, but well, he can't tolerate that. But basically, I think we're not finishing the discussion. It's just starting it. I'm relying on more of this, especially on these important points about scaling up ideas coming from the field. Your point on no one size fits all. This is not just in country level, but in local level, village level solutions that could really be benefiting from an effective partnership and platform. But the Honorable Minister, perhaps in a few seconds, and then we'll give opportunities to the rest of the Honorable panelists, and then I'll give the thank yous to Ola at the end.
Thank you, Chair. I think the shortest way is just to agree with my colleagues here. But as I mentioned in my statement, the adoption of a macro, meso, and micro risk transfer instruments is seen by climate vulnerable countries like Tonga as an integrated approach to address and minimize loss and damage, which is very important. And this is a prime example of a locally led adaptation. Unlike high-level policies that are distant from the realities on the ground, locally led initiatives can leverage local knowledge and also capacities. And such initiatives also have inherent resilience. They are more attuned to the local needs and can more readily adapt to evolving challenges.
Right.
In Tonga, for instance, we are working closely with our communities to build climate resilient infrastructure, to promote sustainable farm practices, and to preserve our mangroves that serve as a natural shields against storm surges. So adaptation alone is insufficient. As climate risks intensify, we all know that the inevitable loss and damage will far exceed our capacity to adapt. I think it's where risk transfer financing solutions come into play. And so there are some...
Thank you so much. Sorry about the time constraint. I'm getting signals from the organizers.
Thank you.
That I'll be in trouble if I'm not finished now. But any final reactions from the two distinguished speakers before I give all the... Yes?
Sorry,
we're out of time. All right? So please accept my apologies, my thanks, my gratitude for having this discussion, more of it in the future. I hope during the preparations of the General Assembly, the UN, and the work of the spring meetings and other events, especially COP29, wherever it's going to be hosted, and we're all focusing as well on COP30. Thank you so much. Great panel.